Luke DeCock of the News and Observer at Luke DeCock on Blue Sky joins us now on the Adam Gold Show. Are you already en route? Are you walking like they tried to back in 2014 when the game was canceled? Are you anticipating trouble getting to the Smith Center?
I have not left yet. I'm not anticipating trouble at this point. Seems like a fairly light snow so far, and I think even if it sticks, it shouldn't cause too many problems. Knock on wood. But I don't see any reason why this wouldn't get played. State's there, and the officials, I presume, are there, and let's go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will leave earlier than normal, but I'm not expecting any major issues. This seems within our capacity to handle as a community and society.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I am. Freezing rain would be different. Freezing rain would definitely be different.
100%. All right, so how do you crystallize a game like this? I mean, it's a must-win for Carolina to keep alive any hope, right? Because I still think that even without a win over Duke, there's a path for them that doesn't involve winning the ACC tournament in Charlotte. But they must win. You can't lose a game to NC State. And for the Wolfpack, can you imagine the Wolfpack not making the ACC tournament?
No, I don't have to imagine it. It's happening right before our eyes. I think that, North Carolina can't afford to lose this or any other game between now and Duke. NC State's got a real uphill climb to get to the 6 or maybe even 7 wins it would take to qualify for Charlotte. But I think, all that said, I think this has the potential to be a pretty good game for a couple of reasons. One, North Carolina blew 2 double-digit leads against Syracuse, or almost blew the second. Let Syracuse get within 2 in the final minute. This is not a team that's playing with a ton of confidence right now, as we all know. Syracuse is not a very good basketball team. And it was not a great matchup for North Carolina, or they turned it into a not great matchup, as well as Jalen Withers played. So, there is no guarantee that North Carolina comes out and blows anyone's doors off. The right. difference in talent and performance between NC State and Syracuse is not massive. And as we saw against Duke and in a couple other games this year, if NC State can get a few shots to fall, that's a team that can gain confidence quickly and play well for spurts. Obviously, they couldn't prolong it against Duke, but they certainly put a scare into the Blue Devils. And look, if there is an ACC tournament to play for, if their season's going to end in a couple weeks, this is the Super Bowl for NC State. This is it. This is the biggest game they may play the rest of the year. So whatever NC State has left in the chamber, they're going to let it loose here. And I think we may see a little bit of a scenario against Duke where they have a bit of an out-of-body experience. Everything finally goes right for them, and they give Carolina everything the Tar Heels can handle. That's kind of what I expect. I don't expect this to be a UNC walkover. I just don't know that the Tar Heels have it in them, and I think State's going to come with whatever they have left.
I go back to that game Monday night game at Cameron Indoor, and I thought the Wolfpack, first of all, played better than Duke. They just don't have nearly the talent, and I thought that was a talent game. Duke didn't play very well. I thought State forced Duke to play one-on-one basketball as opposed to sharing the ball like they normally do. Duke got away with it at the end because they have better players. But to me, that was the Trey Parker that was the coming out party where you went, okay, this guy can positively impact the game. What I don't get is for a 5-game stretch, he averages 20 minutes a game, 12 points a game, and then we get the BC game, and he plays 10 minutes. So I would be using him as the foundation for going forward. And I don't get the sense that Kevin Keatts is doing that.
Yeah, and there's been a couple, the couple of sort of strategic decisions this year that I don't understand. I'm not in those meetings with that coaching staff, but the reliance on Jaden Taylor as a scorer for so much of the season is just it's just not who he is. He's a really good player. He's a really useful player. He's a really good defender. He takes care of the ball. He moves the ball well. He can hit shots when he's open. But I felt like they put way too much pressure on him to sort of make his own shot in key situations. And that's why you ended up with the season kind of going sideways, because they could not finish games that they had a chance to win. That wasn't necessarily the scenario against Duke, but, there's been some personnel management, the heavy commitment at the Final Four even to make Brandon Huntley Hatfield a priority in the portal.
Right.
And he has not been any kind of an impact player. Obviously we've seen that with other ex-Louisville players. I mean, Tyler Johnson has really struggled at times for Wake Forest, particularly the last 9 seconds of the Florida State game. But so, maybe some of those Louisville guys weren't as good as we thought they weren't. But the pieces have never fit right for State. I certainly have that in common with Carolina. And that team just all year has lacked that one volume scorer who wanted the ball in his hands. They've missed DJ Horn. They've missed DJ Horn more than they've missed DJ Burns. And they just haven't had anyone step up. Obviously, you'll get if Mike James had been healthy, but that's a lot to put on one guy. They just didn't have that guy who could make that bucket when they needed it and really wanted it. Had that. Jarkel Joyner had that. Terquavian Smith had that. DJ Horn obviously had it. The give it to me, I'll make it. Even if you miss it, you still wanted it in that situation. It just feels like State's been sort of shifting that responsibility around all year, and it's hurt them. And then obviously once things started to turn south, they really did. But I think we saw a little of that from Trey Parker in the Duke game. And so you go, okay, well, maybe this kid, I thought maybe at some point, Paul McNeil is a big time scorer at Richmond County. I thought maybe he would sort of, things would click and you'd see that in the second half, which we haven't. We've seen it, he's played more at times, but we haven't seen that, the sort of graceful ease of scoring that he had in high school, which, is typical when you're used to spending the entire game with the ball in your hands. That's a period of adjustment, and some freshmen take a while, but it didn't become like a second half of the season thing. And now NC State's got very little left to play for. So yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at next year and I'm thinking I'm going to have Trey Parker back and Paul McNeil back, and those are talented guys. I think there's no question about that. Even if, McNeil's adjustment to college ball hasn't gone as smoothly or as quickly as NC State probably needed it to. You would think that, hey, we've got however many games left. Let's get those guys some experience. Yep. Let's get those guys some minutes. Let's get them into the deep end of the ACC pool and start thinking about what we're going to do next year. Because they're, if they lose tonight, and they very well could play well and lose, Carolina, for all of its issues, is still a talented basketball team in places. NC State really doesn't have anything left to play for. You really have to start thinking about next year. And even in this transfer portal world, even in the revolving door, blah, 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 all that stuff, you do at some point have to say these young kids have to play.
Yeah, you and I will have to have a longer conversation about the impact of freshman recruiting, because I do believe that the portal should be an enhancement to what you've got. It shouldn't be the basis, the foundation for what you are. But we'll have that conversation another time, because I want to ask you about Four Nations. Because you and I didn't really talk about it extensively going in. Has this been better than you anticipated? It has certainly exceeded my expectations.
No, I think it's met my expectations, because I think it's been so long since we've had best on best international play. I think people have forgotten how good it is. I mean, I think back to the 2016 Olympics in Vancouver, how good that was. And, other points along that arc. But, what's happened since the last time we did this is that the United States has really caught up in a lot of ways. Oh, yeah. And Canada, while still very talented when it comes to skaters, the failure of Canada and Quebec in particular to deliver elite goalies anymore has really changed the landscape of international play. It's given teams like Sweden and Finland and the Czechs and Slovaks and the Russians, if they're ever allowed to play again. It's given all of them a chance to compete, because there isn't that Patrick Wall, Marty Brodeur, Marc-Andre Fleury. That pipeline has kind of gotten clogged up a little bit for Canada, whereas the U.S., has the best goalie in the world right now, and Finland has the second best. So that certainly changes the dynamic in international play. And I expected the Sweden and Finland to be a little more competitive than they've been. Obviously, Finland's injuries on defense have absolutely, killed them. But, Sweden played well the other night and against the U.S. And to me, the gap between all of those teams is smaller than it was. And you can throw the Czechs in there too. But it's a tighter window in international play now. We just haven't really had that awakening because it's been so long since that's happened at the elite level. I mean, and really, when we look back at this era of hockey, the sort of 2010s and 2020s, I mean, I think one of the verdicts that history is going to lay upon all of us, and obviously it wasn't up to you and me, but the game of hockey is you missed a chance to have Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid and guys like that playing for Canada more often. I mean, that, even Germany and, how good is Germany now with Draisaitl? We don't know, and Tim Stolze. We don't know because we haven't had those best on best elite competitions, and the Four Nations is a really good window into what I think the Olympics are going to look like. And I think the quality of men's hockey is not maybe as top heavy because Canada doesn't have that edge, but there are more teams that can win than ever before. It's kind of like what we've seen at the World Juniors, where a number of teams are competitive now that maybe weren't as competitive, and it's no longer just a given that Canada is the favorite. I think we see that in international hockey now too, and that's I think a marker of the growth of hockey worldwide and the diversity of the player pool, at least internationally, but also Canada's failure to generate Hall of Fame goalies on an every 5 years pace like it had been for generations.
Yeah, they're hoping that Craig Binnington will have one of those good Craig Binnington games as opposed to what he has been, which has been at times really good within a game, but also a mixed bag in allowing a soft goal, something that we have seen here a little bit, but we're going to leave the Hurricanes out of this, other than to bring up the fact that on Saturday night, the three fights and the intensity aside, did America not get the full Jacob Slavin experience and how he completely neutralized Nathan MacKinnon, and in the times where he was out against Connor McDavid? McDavid, too. They tried that side of the ice, the offensive right side of the ice. There was nothing there for him. Slavin completely shut it down.
I don't know how many times we need to have this conversation. I feel like we've been having it since the Hurricanes finally made the playoffs in 2019. And every year, there's all these national stories about, people are finally realizing how good Jacob Slavin is. I mean, I don't know how many times you have to see him just absolutely smother McDavid. And I think, you go back 2 or 3 years, it kind of would make a running joke about it back on what used to be Twitter about, everyone's going to be amazed when McDavid doesn't score against the Hurricanes because he ends up playing 20 of his 23 minutes or 20 of his 24 minutes against Slavin. It's just, it proves to do it in that venue and under those circumstances. It proves that it's not just a function of the Hurricane system. It's not just a function of who he's been partnered with. It's not a function of being protected by Rod Brindamore, which we know he's not. He can go out against the best players in the world in a role that's not custom made for him and play against the best forwards and still perform at that level. So it's him. It's not creation of the system. It's not a matchup thing. It's not he's not being protected. Of course, we know he's not, but he's thrown into that situation and plays like Jacob Slavin. It's just maybe now people will sort of realize just what that is.
I'm kind of bummed, though, that Seth Jarvis didn't play for Canada against Finland. My guess is that they'll probably roll the same lineup out there, health permitting.
Yeah, and look, he's the amazing thing about his selection of that roster is he hasn't been part of that Team Canada culture. He hasn't been on the junior teams. He hasn't been on the under-18 teams. He's an outsider, even though he is from Winnipeg and heart of hockey country. He's an outsider, and it's the same thing with Team USA. If you're not in that pipeline from birth, it's really hard to crack, both as an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old, and as a pro. It's true a little bit in USA basketball too. It's just a function of the people who pick those teams have known players for years and years, and there's players grow up playing with each other who clear that bar. And when you're not in that group, so he was always going to be the odd man out if it came to making those decisions. I think it's great he got a chance to play. But yeah, you knew when push came to shove, he probably was going to be the first option to come out of the lineup, which to me is a little bit of a mistake. Not that you need to go full Canada, Nagano, 1998, where you're bringing a fourth line, but his ability to kill penalties and play defensively. If you think you're going to get into a tight game with the United States, especially if you can't afford to give up many chances because your goaltending isn't as good, Seth Jarvis is a player I'd rather have than some of the other Canadian forwards.
Yeah, then Travis Konechny. Real quick, 60 seconds. Going to have to limit this. Are you at all surprised, worried that we are still hearing Mikko Rantanen it could be available for another trade?
No, not at all surprised, not concerned yet. I mean, there's some gamesmanship in here. Obviously, the Hurricanes want to sign him as quickly as possible and before the deadline, so you want to use that leverage, so to speak, both sides. But yeah, I mean, the Hurricanes gave up enough for Rantanen. They can't assume it's going to be a rental. They have to explore every opportunity. And if that means flipping him before the deadline, then it does. If it could mean flipping him in June, obviously for a much lower return, but flipping his rights to someone who can sign him. I still think this gets resolved. I think it's fair of Mikko Rantanen to say, hey, I need more time. And I think it's going to come down to the Hurricanes as we get closer to the deadline saying, what is our comfort level here and how do we feel about it? Are we comfortable letting this run? And I think they will be, but I think they're also extremely prudent to keep their options open and see what the market is if they decide that that's not going to work.
Luke DeCock on Blue Sky at Luke DeCock. Appreciate your time, sir. I will see you eventually. It's Whalers night next Thursday, a week from tomorrow. I know you know that. Maybe that will be where I say hi next. I'm
just going to see Chuck Hayden. That's the only reason I'm going.
There you go. All right, you're the man. Thanks, Luke.